And we're back here at the Alley-Oop. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you can. Joined by Andy Bailey for those that didn't see the previous video, or if you're listening to the same podcast on the audio feed. All right, Andy, let's do early awards picks for this season. Only 10 games in, and these, I think, will probably more set the table for what is to come throughout the year. I mean, we've had some times where Steph Curry or Kevin Durant was the early MVP candidate in the last couple of years, and it became Jokic or it became Embiid, and these things can obviously change and shift. But through 10 games, I want to know who your MVP is to start the season.
Sure, and generally speaking, I would hate to predict who the MVP might be after 10 games. I think given what we've seen from Jokic, maybe that is a little more safe than it is in other years.
Yeah, fair.
But I kind of looked at this as if the league just handed out MVP through the first, like who was the MVP of these 10 games? It's got to be Jokic. I mean, we've seen some absurd stat lines from Luka and Stephen Curry, Maxey, Embiid. Like there have been some really, really, really high level performances. But I've been covering the NBA for 13 years now. I've been watching it for probably 30. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody who controls the game the way that Jokic does. He's scoring like a I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, like 30 points on close to 70% true shooting is unfathomable. And that's what he's doing. But he also controls the game as a passer. Obviously, when he doesn't have the ball, he's directing people around the floor, offensively and defensively. He's a one-man wrecking crew on the boards this season. He's leading the league in rebounds per game. I wouldn't even know how to look this up, but I can't imagine many people in the history of basketball were top 5 in points per game, rebounds per game, and assists per game. That's what he's doing right now. I would think maybe a couple of those Russell Westbrook triple-double seasons might be close to there. Oscar Robertson was probably close to there.
Sure.
But it's crazy what he's doing right now. And a lot of it's been without Jamal Murray. Again, like he's far and away to me the MVP of the first 10 games. And that's even with, like I said, some outrageous performances from other guys around the league.
The consistency with him, I think, really stands out. The stat that I think kind of underscores that he's had 20 points and 10 rebounds in 10 straight games. Like that's the most in NBA history. That. Like most in NBA history. Like that just happened. And by the way, he culminated that in this last game. It was a loss to the Houston Rockets, the aforementioned Houston Rockets, but 36, 21, and 11. I looked that up, and other guys have been close to that, but when I plugged in 36, 21, and 11 into StatHead, the last performance that happened like that, 55 years ago by Wilt Chamberlain in the regular season. Playoffs, I think Kareem did it I want to say Kareem did it in 1970 during the Milwaukee Bucks run. But like, I mean, come on, man. It's just...
Which is also 50 plus years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So like, what are we really doing here? Yeah. It is unbelievable to watch. 8-2 record for the Nuggets. So you can't just make the argument that he's putting up good stats on a mediocre or bad team. He is driving winning. And the Nuggets have the 8th ranked defense on cleaning the glass, I believe. So it's not like he hasn't been able to help them defensively either. I think he's been perfectly fine on the defensive end to start this year. And there hasn't really been a storyline about the defense for Denver. If anything, the defense has been strongly positive for the Nuggets at the beginning.
I was just going to say the same thing. Like if you had to try and find something that's different about him, because we've seen him play at an outrageous level for at least the 3 seasons prior to this one, and now obviously these first 10 games. He does look a little bit more engaged defensively than he has in previous regular seasons. He looks more like playoff Jokic on the defensive end in this early part of the season, which I think is different. and I got a ton of crap for this at the time. And if I talked about it again on Twitter, I'm sure I'd get crap for it again. But I always thought he could be like a Marc Gasol type of defender. Um, Probably would never be like quite the rim protector Gasol was, but he's massive. He's typically in the right spots defensively. He has very, very quick hands. He is a dominant defensive rebounder. He can have a real impact defensively, and I think we're seeing that this season. And if he's locked in on both ends of the floor um, for the whole campaign or even most of it, I don't see how they're going to give it to somebody else, especially given what happened after last year's MVP race, as toxic as that got. Um, for him to follow up his second place finish with the postseason that he had, he just left no doubt that this is clearly the best player in the world right now.
Definitely a mea culpa for voters probably incoming here. There is
Could be,
a
yeah.
feeling, I think, that a lot of people owe it to him to make up for a past wrong. And that may not bear out, and maybe somebody else steps up and proves that they are a better candidate this year. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I didn't really have another guy that stood out as a worthy challenger as of yet. But Luka Doncic, 8-2
I
record
had
as
Luka.
well for Dallas
Yeah.
Mavericks. And who are you going to give the MVP to on the Philadelphia 76ers? Is it Tyrese Maxey or Joel Embiid?
Well, you know what's funny is, do you ever check the MVP tracker on Basketball Reference?
I do, and I actually saw
Um,
this graphic that you're about to talk about.
yeah, Embiid was second, right?
Mhm.
So whatever model they use, it's based on previous voting results, and right now Maxey is third. So that just underscores your point. Like he's been ridiculous. I think the Sixers have the best record in the league, um, and those two guys could end up like splitting some votes. We've seen that in the past. The best team has two superstars, and they kind of cancel each other out. So that's certainly possible. I don't think anybody's like a great challenger to Jokic right now, but I did write down Luka too. Um, Dallas is off to a really good start, and he's had some absurd scoring nights. I think the night that he had 44, he was 17 of 21 from the field. Um,
Disgusting. Just tremendously good.
his 3-pointer looks more locked in. He's done a really good job of sort of allowing Kyrie Irving to get up and running there. I think he's empowered new guys like Grant Williams. So he's done really well. And then we talked about them in the earlier segment, the Warriors. The fact that they have a winning record with everybody playing as poorly as they are, I think Stephen Curry at least has to be in the conversation.
Think for sure there's no doubt that he's a for the conversation kind of guy, like a part of the conversation kind of guy, and we'll see whether he can really cross into that. I think they probably still have to win about 50 games in order to
Right.
seriously challenge there, but I mean Steph is Steph. Like there's no doubt about it. Let's move to defensive player of the year. I think that this might be kind of a similar case where there's probably one guy that I'd guess that you have really above the others right now early on in these 10 games.
Well, I hope I don't disappoint you. The second and third names I wrote down, I think, are a little more off the wall, but my leader right now is Gobert. Um, like we mentioned before, Minnesota has the best defense in the league, and I think their perimeter defense deserves a lot of credit for that. Um, Edwards and McDaniels are really good perimeter defenders. I think Kyle Anderson is a really underrated defender, but Gobert is back to looking sort of like a defensive system, like he did with the Utah Jazz. Um, he covers so much ground around the paint. I've always thought he's better on switches on the perimeter than people give him credit for. Everybody's going to point to the low light reels when he gets dusted by somebody like Stephen Curry. But for a 7-1 guy, he's pretty
Yeah.
good on the outside. Um, I don't think anybody tracks this, but he's got to be among the league leaders every year in opposing drivers seeing him in the paint and just realizing he's there and doing a U-turn and going somewhere else. Um, I did an article about him 4 or 5 years ago where I got to talk to the Jazz general manager, Dennis Lindsey, and he said one of the things about Rudy Gobert that's so impactful, um, a lot of what he does is prevent actions. So nothing gets recorded in a stat sheet. He just prevents so much from happening with his size and his timing, and he's back to that kind of player. So he would be my pick right now.
Yeah, Gobert's definitely my pick as well. He has been unbelievable to start the year, as you mentioned. Teams are shooting 47.87 EFG against Minnesota right now, which is it's
It's
insane. Like
crazy.
average for that is
Yeah.
about 52, 53% most years. And he has really been a big factor in making sure the teams can't get anywhere close to the rim. I watched them against the Denver Nuggets, one of the best offenses in the NBA, and he was dynamic in how he shut them down. And a team like Denver that wants to go towards the rim in pretty much everything that they do, he blocked everything up. And obviously, Jaden McDaniels does get some credit for that. And I do think that there is an interesting kind of dynamic. You remember when the Sixers were the number one defense or very close to it with Simmons and Embiid, and it's hard kind of to
Hmm.
parse credit between those two, where Simmons was the main perimeter versatile guy who a
Hmm.
lot of team like, and he was the one who got all the defensive player of the year buzz one year where Gobert still won it. But Embiid was the guy who all the impact metrics loved and all the on off data loved for sure. I, I'm not sure how to parse that sometimes because when you talk to like NBA teams, they know that both are necessary. It's not
Hmm.
about really one versus the other in terms of creating a defensive identity like that, but it's probably harder to recreate what Gobert's done so far than what McDaniels has done so far, just because you can switch off on different defensive perimeter guys, and it's really hard to make up for lack of rim protection.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I always sort of default to rim protector being the most important, but you saw some series like the infamous Clippers series when he was with the Jazz. I can't remember. Did they have? I can't remember if they had a series lead or not. But eventually, they get burned by Terrence Mann in whatever game that was, and it was because there was no containment on the perimeter, and suddenly Rudy Gobert's got to guard like three or four people on the back line, possession after possession. So rim protection is incredibly important. Um, it can be it can be neutralized if you don't have perimeter defenders. So it's sort of a balancing deal there.
Oh, both are important, and like Jaden McDaniels should absolutely be a first team all defense guy. If I'm
He's
doing
been
those kind of
ridiculous.
grades right
Yeah.
now, he's unbelievable, and like moving
Hmm.
your feet at that size, at that effectiveness, and like getting into guys and then making their lives hell is still a very important part of this. So
Yep.
I think like you mentioned, the point of attack defense is important in making sure that the rim protection matters.
Hmm.
And it's probably the biggest reason why they're the number one team right now is they've got both. They don't have one or the other, and they aren't like you don't have to figure out which one is more valuable because they've got both.
Right.
Um,
It's a good way to put it.
any other DPOY candidates for you?
Like I said, these might be a little weird. I've always thought Jason Tatum's defense was kind
Hmm,
of underrated, and Boston is number two defensively right now. I think the easy pick that most people would make for that is either Derek White or Drew Holiday, and they've both been really good defensively. But I think Tatum has a little bit of what you just talked about with Jaden McDaniels, where he's really big and he moves his feet very, very well. He's a good positional defender. I actually thought the year that Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year that Tatum may have had just as good a, or if not better, case than he did.
sure.
Um, so he's long been a guy who I've thought is underrated defensively, and I just thought, well, they're second in defense. Maybe I'll give a nod to Tatum. And then the third one, I mentioned he's not a personal favorite of mine, but Dylan Brooks has been kind of a culture changer for the Rockets defense. Um, they're a team that is definitely more reliant. We just had this discussion of perimeter defense versus rim protection, and even though Şengün has gotten better defensively, their defensive strength is certainly on the perimeter, and I think Dylan Brooks has a ton to do with that.
Absolutely hard to argue after seeing what he did versus Denver last game. And he just looks great. He looks like he found a home here, and like he's bringing the best things about the Memphis Grizzlies to a team like the Houston Rockets, and not kind
Mm-hmm.
of kind of leaving the rest of the stuff behind. At
I
least at
agree with
this
that.
point,
Yeah.
there are still some antics. There's still some things you kind of you kind of raise an eyebrow at eventually, but and then that may burn them down the line. But through 10 games, like I think it's a very fair pick.
Yeah. I agree with all that.
Let's go to most improved player. I think this for me this was a pretty easy call based off of the previous conversations that we had. Tyrese Maxey, like
Yeah.
the numbers that we just saw him put together: 28 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, 50, 43, 90 splits as a
That's
shooter.
outrageous.
Like
Yeah.
that's disgusting, and they are MVP caliber numbers, as we mentioned in the previous segment. I am very high on Tyrese Maxey. I was high on him initially. I never thought he could get to this level, but he has.
Yeah. He's my top pick too. And there's obviously a lot of time for his numbers to come down to earth a little bit. I've always liked Tyrese Maxey too, especially in the playoffs. Like when there were those moments over the last couple of years where it looked like everybody else on the Sixers was breaking down. Maxey never really seemed to. He seems like a guy who kind of has that. Um, he has that it factor that allows him to rise to the moment in the
That
playoffs.
dog in him, if you will.
There you go. um, but even with like my optimistic perception of him would have been like 23, 24 points would be his ceiling per
Sure.
game, maybe 6 assists. Um, if he maintains 29 and 7 for the whole season, like that's potentially altering the landscape of the NBA. Like there's your all-star, all-NBA running mate for Joel Embiid, and that makes them a contender again, I think. So he's the easy pick for me too. I think he's starting to run away with the odds in the books as well, not surprisingly. Um, it's going to be hard to pick against him if he keeps this up.
He just meets the exact profile that you're looking for. A young guy that has an expanded role that is also better, that
Right.
is in a high profile situation and goes from kind of a borderline star to a clear star. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how the MIP has really sort of broken down over the course of the last few years. Other guys I considered: Alperen Şengün, Tyrese Halliburton,
Yep.
Scotty Barnes. Like I think all three of those guys should probably get some consideration. Just young guys that are really figuring things out in their situations. But Maxey's my runaway.
Maxey's my runaway too. The other two names that I had listed, you just mentioned, Şengün and Scotty Barnes, both of whom I think have taken pretty legitimate steps forward this season, just not quite the leap that Maxey has.
Yeah, and Halliburton I might be overstepping on, but he's like borderline MVP candidate to me too. So I was just like,
He
you
could
know
be in the
what?
mix for sure. Yeah.
Let's just throw him in there because he's leading the best offense in the league, 23 and 12, and the efficiency with him is just nutso as well. So, and
Crazy.
the other thing about Halliburton, and Maxey also has this too. Neither of those guys turned the ball over, which is such an underrated skill where they're just not
Mm-hmm.
making mistakes. And if you're getting shots up or you're setting people up consistently and you're not turning it over, you are so much more valuable than people mostly give credit for.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Let's go to Rookie of the Year now. I thought that this was a two-man race initially, but I didn't necessarily delve too deeply into this. I'm curious to where you want to go on this.
I didn't go too deep on this one either. I think I think I could very easily argue for Chet Holmgren as the Rookie of the Year through 10 games, 9 games, or whatever OKC has played. If I had to make a prediction for who's going to win it, I'd still go with Wembanyama. Um, and I might still go with him for the first 10 games thing for the same reason I probably would have gone with Banchero last year. Um, there were rookies who had better, like significantly better impact numbers than Banchero last season. Everybody freaked out about the Walker Kessler vote, but impact wise, he was really, really good. Jalen Williams is another guy who had better impact numbers than Banchero. But Banchero had this, huge responsibility on offense for the Magic. And I
Sure.
think Wembanyama has this huge responsibility on both sides of the floor for San Antonio. And he's still putting up crazy numbers. I think his impact numbers would look better if they would knock off the Jeremy Sohan at point guard experiment. Um, Like, I understand what they're doing with that, but I think San Antonio could be competitive like right now if they would just play Wembanyama with a real point guard, and they have one in Trey Jones. Um, so that's my long-winded way of saying I'm going to go with Wembanyama here, but there's a real argument for Chet.
The thing that I wrote down, because I had both names too. I wrote Wemby versus Chet. I wrote Wemby for the impact within the situation, and Chet
Mm,
for the statistical impact. Like, just
there you go.
it's. I think that is the way to frame this, at least in the first 10 games, where yeah, any number is going to tell you that Wemby has not been as good as Chet, just from the impact metrics and everything. Where Wemby's situation, he is turning the ball over more. He's being asked to do more. He has a 30% usage rate. Like, what are we doing? That is a rookie
Hmm.
holding a 30% usage rate with all the pressure that he already has on him. Like, LeBron doesn't do that. Like, he didn't do that.
And having to be like all of their defense. Like he's more than just the backline rim protector. I mean, they're having him guard fours in a lot of these games. So he's got a ton of
You
responsibility. And the other thing I should have mentioned about Chet too is, of course, his impact numbers are going to be better. Like he's playing off of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, um, Josh Giddey to a degree. Like he has guys absolutely making his life easier.
Lou Dort's been really good for them too. Like,
Hmm.
they have a situation where all you needed was a 5 man, and they found a competent one in Chet. That is underselling Chet a little bit, and I think that he's going to be great. But I think that Wemby is. I think I would go with Wemby right now, because rookie of the year, you don't necessarily have to go with the most impactful rookie. You have to
Right.
go with. I think there is some level of future value that you're trying to get with an award like this, and projection with an award like this, that is just a little bit different than some of the others. So I would probably go Wemby, and just understanding that his situation is far worse than Chet's. But I mean, shout out to Chet Holmgren for, like, putting up identical numbers in a lot of ways to Victor
Hmm.
Wembanyama, the most hyped rookie we've ever seen.
Yeah. Chet's been really, really good. Yeah, I agree with everything you said there.
Where do you want to go with some other awards? Do you have any others that you're very focused on right now?
Um, Not super focused, and peek behind the curtain. We kind of talked about not talking about six man of the year before we started, but um, I will just say, and I already mentioned him at some point in this podcast. I would love for 1 year for six man of the year to not go to just like one of the top scorers off the bench, because that's so been the tradition for so long. Um, I think Kyle Anderson is just an awesome basketball player. I have loved him since his days at UCLA, and I think he has a lot to do with how good the Timberwolves have been out of the gate. And he's not going to get any six man of the year buzz as we go through this season, because he's going to average 7 or 8 points. He's not going to have like highlight dunks, but he guards a bunch of different positions. He can run the offense. He can hit a three if he's wide open. I think he's just a phenomenal connector. He can connect with the starters. He can connect with the bench. He's a guy that I think at least deserves a mention if we're going to bring up six man of the year.
Shout out Kyle Anderson. Shout out to Chris Paul in that potential discussion as well, where,
Sure.
like, we've talked about how in the hell the Warriors have been, like, are surviving. A lot of it is because of Steph Curry, but a lot of it is because their bench is actually winning their minutes, and Chris Paul's
Mm-hmm.
helping win their minutes. So, and with that situation where nobody's really shooting well and they're still finding ways to get it done, then I think that he deserves some credit there too. But in a lot of the same ways as a cerebral player, although I'm not gonna lie, the diving into Mike Conley's knee sort of rubbed me the wrong
Ridiculous.
way. Rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, he has all the flopping and the extra stuff, and then dirty plays like that has always been difficult for me. With Chris Paul, obviously one of the greatest point guards of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, but stuff like that drives me nuts. Aside, I posted that video. Um, I just like quote tweeted somebody, and Rudy Gobert liked it, which I thought was funny.
Mm.
One of Conley's teammates liking a post calling a current NBA player one of the dirtiest of all time was a little eye opening.
It's true though. It's
But I would guess he's not the only current NBA player who might agree with that assertion.
look, there is a reason why every team in the NBA was cackling at the Phoenix Suns' downfall the last 2 years.
Yeah, and he's been, with the exception of that 1 year in OKC, like somehow I don't know if it was just because they were an underdog for so long, or he actually like reined in some of that extra stuff that season. Like I found him and that team pretty likable.
Yeah.
Some of his early Hornets teams I thought were cool, like when he played with Peja and David West and those guys. Um, but a lot of what he's done is tough over the course of his career.
You know what? Screw it. We're going with Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson, you are the sixth man of the year.
Let's
We will not be
go.
taking any other submissions at this time. All right, two more here before we wrap up. Then let's go with best team and worst team that you've seen so far.
I'm going to go with the Nuggets for best team. I think there's a strong case for the Celtics. I think there's a strong case for the 76ers. Um, from what I've seen from the fully healthy Nuggets, and it may be a bit before we see them again, I think they'll probably be understandably cautious with Jamal Murray's timeline. When they're all together, that is such a well-oiled machine that checks so many boxes. All those guys know how to play with each other really well. Denver's bench has looked pretty bad the last couple games, but I think a big part of that is just thrown out of whack because Murray was the one leading that second unit in the early part of the season. So I think it'll look good again once he comes back. So with the caveat that I'm thinking of like a fully healthy team, the 8-2 Nuggets I think are my pick right now.
I think they're my pick too. I wrote them down, but I do think that the Celtics and the Sixers, like the Celtics have lost 2 games by like a combined 4 points, 5 points. So
the Celtics roster, I think the Celtics, like there's an argument they have a better top 6 than anybody else in the league. Like they are built so well. I would pick Denver in a series still because I think the rosters are close enough that I would just default to who has the best player, and that's Jokic. But Boston's legit, and so are the Sixers.
Yeah, 100% on both of those teams. I do think that it is the Nuggets for the reasons that you've stated, but I mean, if anybody wants to say the Celtics or the Sixers, I'm not going to get an argument out of me right now. Worst team that I've seen so far is the Pistons. It's unfortunate, but I think that you could also make an argument for the Wizards. You could also make an argument for maybe the Hornets at times. Like they look incapable in a lot of ways. But for me, the Pistons, I don't know what's going on with the Jaden Ivey situation. Just start Jaden Ivey. What are you doing? like you have Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson. Just start those guys. Start them next to a big man, and then find your ideal stretch 4. That would be my just pleading to the Pistons at some point. Please just make it easier on yourselves and like just commit to a spacing system and get some scoring in there to help out Cade.
Maybe that'll happen. I don't even know what is Bojan Bogdanovic dealing with.
You know what? That's a great question. I was when I said stretch 4, like his name immediately comes to mind because he's on the roster. Like, what's going on?
And that's what he was. I just looked him up. He's got a calf injury. It says he's out for a few more weeks. So I think that will help. I think at some point Cade Cunningham is going to have to start making some shots. Another stat that I looked up in the last couple of days, over the course of his career, among players who've taken at least as many shots for him, he's dead last in effective field goal percentage. And he's got a big offensive responsibility too, so he gets a little bit of a pass for that. But after 3 years, it's fair to wonder, like, is he going to start making some shots? I think my worst team would probably be Washington, but I just looked up just now, like who has the worst net rating just to see. It's kind of surprising that on Cleaning the Glass, so like the filtered out garbage time, the New Orleans Pelicans are dead last, which I mentioned them as a disappointment earlier. I didn't even realize that when I mentioned them. That they've been worse than I even realized. I certainly wouldn't say that they're the worst team in the league just because there's so much talent on that roster, and I think they're going to figure some things out over the course of the season. But that was a little surprising. If I had to settle on a worst team right now, I'd go Washington. I think Portland is going to get back in that mix once Scoot Henderson gets healthy. Charlotte could be in that mix. They seem kind of rudderless right now. Like LaMelo's been good the last few games, but they're going to be in the mix for a real high lottery pick.
Yeah, I mean, all great candidates to be clear. We'll see whether that plays out and whether some of these teams can get out of these early season ruts or if they are just as bad as we think they will be. I think with Washington, like that's probably the easy candidate to say, yeah, this is going to be a pretty large staple of their season, going 2-8 over the course of 10 games. Like that's sounds about right. But hey, I mean, see what Detroit does. They're a team for a bounce back candidacy. The Pelicans, like you said, I mean, they should. I know that they've dealt with injuries. They should not be this bad. They just
No,
there's no reason. Like they've got too much talent to be that bad. So they're a team I'll be watching closely as well.
totally agree with all that. Yep.
All right, well, Andy, I think that is going to do it for this episode of the Alley Oop. You've been tremendous as a guest. I really do appreciate it. Where can the people find your lovely work?
Well, I spend way too much time on Twitter/X, so they can find me at Andrew D Bailey there. I'm also, if you have the Bleacher Report app, I'm sure you see me every once in a while. I do the power rankings every week, and I'll have articles pop up here and there. So that's where you can find me.
Good stuff. He is Andy Bailey. Make sure to go check his stuff out. And I mean, you've probably already followed him, if we're being honest, especially if you know me. But if you know of Andy, you know he is a Jokic truther among us Jokic truthers. So thank you so much for hopping on, man. Really appreciate it. And everybody else, we'll talk to you guys in a few days.